Forward,
backward,
backward.
and then nesting.
All right, thank you. We really wanted to talk about what's going on below ground. Brian talked about things that are above ground earlier in the day. So we'll talk about what's going on below ground with trees and how we can help them out. A lot of landscapes now, obviously we're doing a lot of conversions. A lot of turf is being removed still. And just a lot of moving into different areas. We need to preserve the existing canopy as part of our construction. So tree protection becomes a very big and important part of any landscape plan. There's a few different parts of it, and just we'll run through it really quickly because I'm standing between us and some hors d'oeuvres and beer and wine, so we'll make it quick. So the tree protection is it's starting to be more of a requirement for local jurisdictions. The critical root zone, one way to calculate that and estimate it is 1 foot for every 1 inch, a 1 foot radius for every 1 inch diameter of tree trunk. So you got a 24-inch tree, you want to have a 24-inch root protection zone. The tree protection zone is the area where construction activities are prohibited. Basically, you want to keep your tractors out. Build a nice sturdy fence, which is the tree protection barrier. 4 foot high, so we can see it. Lots of signage, and you want it to be sturdy so that, just putting some hurricane fencing up, nice orange fencing, someone's going to move it and park their truck under there to be in the shade. So we want to make sure to protect the base of the tree. Basically this is done to protect the roots of the tree, help them with, that's the most important part, that's where the water is getting absorbed. Sometimes we'll see people put down mulch around the tree that wasn't there before. Keep it a thin layer, help keep the water and the roots absorbing the water during construction. The big thing we wanted to talk about was irrigation. It's really kind of a hot topic right now still. Obviously we're out of the drought, right? Reservoirs are full for now. Sure has been a long hot summer already though, so something we're still going to need to be watching. So really three major parts of irrigation best management practices is your design. You want to have it designed for water use efficiency and the site that you're on. You're going to water differently if you're out on the coast than if you're out in El Cajon. Proper watering for all landscape elements. We're starting to see hopefully the tide turn from where people can say, okay, well, we're having a park, I'm going to put down some grass, I'm going to plant some trees, and we're just going to water and everything's going to be green, and as long as the grass is green, everything's going to be fine. That's really not the case. Trees need different water requirements. They need not as often, but also longer duration. You want that water to be going deep into the ground. Where grass wants the top 1 or 2 inches, trees want 6, 7, 8 inches of water. We want to install our irrigation to meet design criteria. So you're going through, you're consulting with an irrigation consultant, developing your plans. You want to make sure that there's no corners being cut by the contractor. And manage landscape water resources. Remember Ron Popeil? Set it and forget it. It's not what we want to do. We want to set it, monitor it, make changes as we go along. We're going to need to make changes to the irrigation schedule for December versus July. The big thing for trees. Trees require separate irrigation control valves. We want infrequent, deep irrigation. Water where the roots are. So for trees, that's going out pretty much at minimum to the edge of the canopy. Really going beyond is even better. Drip and micro irrigation is best wherever practical. It's not, we'll show a slide later, it's not those bubblers that you stick in the ground. That doesn't quite get water where we need it. Organic mulch. Consider mulch as a design element. One thing that the picture in front of Brian's house, if you guys saw, you had some grass, you had a nice little pathway, you had your trees, you had a driveway, and you had more grass. Underneath the trees was what? It was mulch. Wasn't grass. So the best thing for the landscape underneath trees is organic mulch. That's what they have in the forest. Grass tends to be watered differently, so we want to keep them separate. Benefits of it, it helps retain soil moisture. As that mulch breaks down, it actually adds nutrients and it improves the soil profile. You can turn hard clay soils into a lot more organically containing soils by keeping mulch going over the course of time. It'll protect your drip irrigation. That's kind of a problem. That's why we like those the big rotator spray nozzles. That's why we like the big sprinklers, because they can stand up to some use and abuse. We start stepping all over the drip irrigation, and that's going to start being a problem. So it does help protect that irrigation. Reduces competition from grass, other plants. Another big thing is it provides protection against mower damage. We start seeing this in parks a lot that have grass growing underneath the trees. Mower comes in, starts shaving off the roots, and just starts causing problems with the structure of the tree. What we want to do is keep it 3 to 4 inches deep, definitely away from the trunk. I didn't put a picture of a mulch volcano in here. You guys know what I'm talking about? We'll see it on the East Coast a lot. They mulch up 2-3 feet sometimes. That's just going to cause decay and rot at the base of the trunk. So we want to keep it 3 to 4 inches and then keep it a couple inches away from the base of the trunk so that we're not causing any damage there. And extend to the drip line, ideally, recognizing we're all taking different things into account when we're designing these landscapes. So if you can't go to the drip line, 4 to 5 foot minimum around the trunk is going to be the best. Drip systems for trees, really spiraling it out or doing concentric circles and just having inline emitters is the best practice there. You want to start near the trunk, spiral it outwards until you get to the drip line or beyond. And we place that under mulch for maximum effectiveness. Was looking at a tree one time and it was like, yeah, we water it. We got a drip system, we put it on, but we're essentially watering the mulch. The mulch was absorbing all the water, the tree wasn't getting anything. So one, they had a problem with duration, how long they were watering, but two, the irrigation wasn't set up right in the first place. Watering considerations. Watering requirements for trees depend on size, species, location, season. You're going to water the same species differently out here than you are out in East County. Consult an arborist. Arborists are out here to help. We all need to talk more. Sam, good to see you. Haven't seen you enough lately. Sam's an arborist too. We all are after the same thing. Landscape architects, arborists, we all want healthy, vigorous trees in our landscape. So let's all work together. The watering considerations can be as little as 10 gallons a week for new trees. 500 gallons per month for large trees is something that can be required, especially in times of drought. If we're not getting enough rain in the wintertime to water the trees to help them get through the summer drought, we need to provide some supplemental watering when that's going on. What this means is we may need to run irrigation for hours, not minutes. You're not putting on a drip system, running it for 20 minutes and calling it good like you can with some lawn rotors. You may need to water it for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes. That's why we need those separate irrigation control valves again. And when watering, you want to ensure the soil is moist to a depth of 12 to 14 inches. I threw this in here, almost took the slide out. These tree gators, tree watering bags, they're an alternative you can use when you're establishing new trees, but the problem here is if you're using them, then you don't have irrigation installed in the first place. So, and those cases where you need them, yeah, let's use them. Ideally, we have the irrigation installed. They have them in park settings in these photos. Probably where they'd be a little more ideal is in street cutouts in front of houses. When we're establishing the trees, we want to make sure they have a consistent amount of water going on, and that may be a little hard for the homeowners to help provide supplemental irrigation for city trees. So we can use these, get them going for the first couple of years, and then maybe we can get the homeowner to sign on for watering that tree once a month to keep it going. But they are in place. I do see them used a lot, not so much here, but just something to think about if you're designing in that sort of landscape. One thing we also wanted to talk about too was turf replacement. That's definitely happening a lot, right? We're getting irrigation or getting rebates and things like that. People are redesigning their landscape. Ripping up the grass and leaving a tree, that's ideal instead of taking out the tree too and planting a new one. But what you got to think about is that that tree is going to be growing in a completely different environment. Now it's used to having the grass underneath. It's used to a certain watering scheme, which is probably going to change and may not have been ideal, but it was still what it was used to. So it's going to cause some stress by removing that grass. When you're doing this is a good time to ensure proper irrigation for the trees. Obviously, we're doing some major landscape renovations when we're taking out the grass, so let's make sure we got good irrigation practices going in to make that landscape successful. Mulch is very important here. Organic mulch is huge. A lot of rock and things like that going in. That's not really ideal. It creates a lot of heat and can actually sunburn the tree. Artificial turf too. That artificial turf that uses the black tires, I mean, that stuff gets hot. I got a 15-year-old that plays soccer, and they put all that on all the football fields now, and it's super hot. You know, they're out there wetting their shoes down, so think what it's doing to a tree that has to live under or live above it and underneath it throughout its life. So use a thinner layer of organic mulch that's probably not used to being mulched already. So, you know, maybe instead of 3 to 4 inches, just put a couple inches down. That lets the air still get down to the roots and lets them develop where they need to be. And yeah, stay away from rock and artificial turf underneath the trees. We can still talk about drought. We still need to talk about drought. It's going to be a factor for really a long time coming. Lawns are expensive. Lawns are less expensive to replace than trees. You get a 30, 40-year-old tree, you take that out, it's going to be 30, 40 years before you get that tree back. You take a lawn out, you can have a lawn in 2 months. So let's make sure that if we are cutting back on water, we're reducing turf irrigation, we need to think about what we're doing to the trees. They can handle a lot of times a 20 to 40% reduction, but you got to monitor the health. So if you're just reducing the amount of water you're putting down, just make sure that you're paying attention to the tree, how it's looking, and give it some more water if need be. You can do that with the soaker hose, the drip line that we were showing. Bring in a watering truck if you need to. But you want to provide a good deep watering 1 to 2 times a month. The San Diego Urban Forest Council website, that's something I'm a member of. Essentially we're part of a larger California Urban Forest Council organization, which you may have heard of, probably not, but we're really trying to get the messaging out a lot with tree watering and the importance of trees and the investment in the community that they make. So sdrufc.com, we've got some tree watering guidelines on there. We're working with Water Authority and things like that, and we're developing some parallel messaging that we can get out to everybody. These are the ones we don't want, the non-preferred irrigation, the bubblers. Problem is, this is, I can't remember what city I pulled this from. San Diego has something similar. When you're installing trees, you have to install a 6 by 36 inch perforated drain pipe filled with clean pea gravel to house the irrigation bubbler. That water, the bubbler will water right here. It's going to water right here, great. Where it's not going to water is over here. It's not going to water over here. So if your design specs are calling for that, while you're going through the initial design of the project, consider trying to change it. Work with the client that you're working for and say, hey, look, these are more acceptable practices to use drip systems. Let's try to do this instead. If it's not possible, definitely separate control valves you got to monitor. Make sure everything's going good. I think Brian talked about this a lot too, that we're not just designing the landscape. Landscape architects are really the first step in a big partnership that takes place for a healthy landscape. We've got the design, we've got the construction, the big part is the maintenance. When these projects are being designed, the client needs to know you're going to need to water here, this is what your water budget's going to be, this is what you need to plan for. Otherwise, all this work that I'm doing, I might as well not even do. We can just go throw some rock out and call it good, right? Or you can plan to replace the landscaping every few years. So just want to throw this out there that, stay involved. Be involved with the construction, write maintenance plans into your designs. Just a little infographic. What do we need to do to keep trees healthy too? We need to get moving, we need to inspect the trees, we need to find when somebody's cutting them in half when they're still babies and make sure that we can go out there and fix it. Keep them well fed, give them some fertilizer. Healthy hydration, the irrigation that we've been talking about. Make good choices. It's just putting the right trees in the proper landscape. Look up. Look for power lines. Don't put a palm tree underneath power lines. Try to design without palm trees anyway. And schedule regular checkups. Work with arborists. Get some inspection done. Make sure everything's growing good. That's all part of the partnership. I hope nobody worked on this one. This was the Burger King out in Rancho San Diego. Kid that plays soccer also likes chicken fries, so we'll go there. He likes chicken fries, so we go there fairly regularly. So going through the drive-through, circle around and see they're doing some construction. I see these trees sitting in the parking lot one week. A couple weeks later, see them in the ground, and they're probably 36-inch box or something. And the box sides were off. The trees hadn't been backfilled. They hadn't been watered. That's going to not end well. A couple weeks later, yeah, they finally watered them, but this little guy probably wasn't enough. So it's part of the partnership, though, staying involved during the construction process, right? Those trees, one, never should have been left on the pavement for a week. Blacktop, yeah, summertime. Two, they get the trees in the ground. They need to get them irrigated, get the soil backfilled, and keep things moving, because otherwise that happens. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions?
So I have a question about the drip tubing around the tree and not using bubblers, because I always use bubblers. So, but my fear is if you have a separate system, drip system for the trees, most of the time your trees are in a shrub area anyways. So the contractor is going to have to, specifically, I have a feeling unless you're involved in construction administration, they're going to be like, oh, we'll just keep doing the drip for the shrubs, and then the tree doesn't get any extra watering, whereas now at least it gets the bubbler. Is there another alternative that could keep it separate from the drip, but still, would you recommend doing little sprays maybe instead of the bubbler?
Yeah, the sprays can work. If they're installing separate systems, you're doing a fresh install, it's a good idea. Separate them out some more. Still have, the trees need different watering requirements than the shrubs too, so if you want to add to that.
The valve, having a separate valve for the trees is really important. And bubblers can work if it's flat. What you showed was the deep root water, and that was kind of developed at one point, throw the gravel in the bubbler, and then manufacturers said, oh, we can sell this. And they're like $42.50 a piece. And what happens is the flood bubbler goes below the root zone and follows the irrigation trench. So often the plants are totally under stress with the deep root water things. A flood bubbler that sends a plane out of water on a flat surface and perks through the root zone is okay. But the drip, whether it's a flood bubbler, drip, or tubing around, that's really a runtime issue. The important part is getting an isolated valve for the irrigation, if that makes sense. So in the contract you just spec, you have a tree line and a shrub line. And if you wrap drip tubing around it, that works. If you have a really flat plane and you wanted a 0.25 GPM, that would work, bubbler on both sides, or a drip would work both sides. Deep root waters aren't so good. The water goes past.
And then do you have any details for the drip tubing? I know you have details, but...
Yeah, we have.
Oh, you do?
We can probably link to some better details, but that basic design, concentric circles and spirals, and with, you think, well, I'll just add more, I'll add more drip heads, right? And the tree will get more water, but we start to see the water running off. So it really is keeping it slow and keeping the water from running off. Slow and long duration. Sam?
Yeah, you mentioned planting shrubs around trees. It is actually better not to plant shrubs around trees because there is no way you're going to be watering shrubs on one system or schedule and water the trees on another schedule and not still get the trees to get too much water. What works for the shrubs is not going to work for the trees. It's either the trees get too much water or the shrubs don't get enough water. So it is better to plant them away from one another. And from a distance, it's not going to look much different. You're still going to think like, looking at it from a distance, you're going to think the shrubs are actually closer to the trees.
From an arborist perspective, what we'd love, what looks great to us is a tree with a whole bunch of, well, not a whole bunch, a proper amount of mulch underneath it and nothing else. Get it. These are beautiful too. And so it's finding a balance. Finding a balance in there, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about root barriers? We have this situation where, in parkways, there's always a concern about damage to parts of the sidewalks or where street trees really don't offer shade because they're getting smaller and smaller to try to avoid that. I had read fairly recently that in Australia they're getting away from it. They decided that the root barriers really don't serve a purpose. What is the evolving thought on that?
I'm going to interject for one moment because I'd love to bring Brian up to be part of that answer and also Nick. And we'll just do kind of a quick informal panel. I know we've done some round robin questions, but maybe we can get you.
Yeah, definitely.
Around your
Yeah.
But I want to. We've got beautiful food waiting for us, and I want to be able to share everybody. So maybe you guys can sit up here, or Sebastian, so you don't have to follow around. Trip over everything. I'll be captured on film.
We don't really like root barriers either. Silvacells are and it's a way to provide a structure underneath the pavement. Granted, it's also pretty expensive, but Keep La Mesa Beautiful, they had a really good example of that. I think they installed it last year, and so they're able to put these structures underneath the pavement, and it keeps the soil from compacting. You can actually create areas that the water can easily infiltrate, and when the roots are going where they're supposed to, they're not going back up towards the sidewalk, that's when you start having less issues. So ideally, a Silvacell or a similar sort of structure like that.
Can you hear me if I yell?
Yeah, can we stop the mic? I think all three of us can definitely not use it. So.
And ideally, what he's talking about is limiting compaction, and decompaction on construction sites is ideal, but as you know, people track all over everything and compact the soil, which is what often you get surface roots. So surface roots is a function of genetics, soil conditions, and cultural practices, which means water. If you have no other alternative, and Silvacells are good in structural soil, the jury's somewhat out, that is ideal, but if you have absolutely no alternative, linear barriers, not circular, but linears at a parkway are not the worst thing in the world if they're not so deep. So, you have your gutter pan and your sidewalk on one side and the other. It doesn't have to go down 24 or 36 inches deep. Basically, what his research has shown is the roots go down, they come back up. Ideally, they come back up on the other side of the hardscape and on the other side of the gutter pan. Sidewalks, expensive to fix, but it's not as expensive to fix as a gutter pan with a flow line. That's outrageous. Ed Gilman has the longest research study that's still going on linear root barriers. It's about 20 years now. And he found if they're not too deep and if everything's done right, the tree will anchor a root, not cause problems. But if you do the really deep ones and you have heavy clay soils, it can be an issue. So how you detail it, how it's installed, what your conditions are, I agree 100% that something like a Silvacell, which is effectively limiting compaction, is more ideal. But should you have to use them, there is a better way to go about it that will do less damage and better anchoring for the plant. But in general, arborists don't tend to like them.
See, Miriam's got a question back there.
So many years ago, 25 years ago, because San Diego's soils were so compacted and zero percolation, our industry somehow did develop a detail that is a pure air standpipe. It was prior to any of the deep tube watering pipes. We're still in favor of using that because it gets air down into the lower root ball, and it was drilled oftentimes 3 feet below the bottom of the pit. So it moved the water that didn't move laterally, it moved that at least away from the rotting roots at the bottom of the pit. So I've had an arborist tell me, I think out of confusion, not to use any of that, but I would like to still get a several consensuses that in San Diego soils, which is very different than the soils in Los Angeles Basin or where you are, we have issues here.
They would vary within San Diego. I would say that it's probably different from one end of the parking lot to the other, depending on fill and where you actually got those soils. Construction soils vary based on grade a lot. There's not definitive research that shows that vertical pipe allows oxygen exchange in soil. The value that I think you might be seeing is once the plant is established, meaning you've got proper irrigation through the root zone, that you get some drainage off of the root ball so the plant is not water, probably more, at least in my opinion, more value than the oxygen exchange. Roots are they're gonna, 2 things. They need water and oxygen. And the amount of oxygen that can be around that pipe is probably limited in the greater distance of what a root zone is on a large growing tree. Meaning, if you saw the tree protection zone, if you put a pipe this big around in front of an oak that has a root zone that's 60 feet wide, it's probably not going to move enough oxygen to be significant. But in a period of establishment, moving water around and keeping it off the root crown or not super saturated probably has a lot of value, potentially. And it's a good monitoring device. I'm working on a big project that has some drainage issues, and it lets us peek down there to see what the water's doing. And that has a lot of value.
Thank you.
All right, so if that's it, I think we'll thank our guests very much for donating their time and expertise. And then we are going to kind of move out onto the patio where I know Susie's going to raffle off some wonderful plants. And we got some great food and beverages out there.